Hi, I'm Scott Jones, and as a career, I've chosen to be a telecommunications engineer, and I've been doing that since really the mid-1980s. There have been a couple of events that really led me into that path that I think are kind of interesting and important historically. Certainly have defined who I am and what I've become. The first of those was back in 1969. 1969 was a big year, kind of a tumultuous year for me and my family. January of 1969, I was 6 years old, and my dad, who worked at the school system, in January of that year went to work and never came home. He passed away that day, and it obviously changes the family dynamic and everything else that's going on. So as a low as that is, in July of 1969, it was a real high moment, if you will, and one that kind of set the tone for what I would do with my life and who I would become. In July of 1969 was the Apollo 11 landing on the moon in July of 1969. It was an interesting event for a whole host of reasons. Watching Neil Armstrong walk down and set foot on the moon was inspiring. Myself and billions of other people around the world witnessed one of the most remarkable events in human history. It was defining for myself, and I'm sure for many others. And at that moment, I wanted to become a scientist and an engineer, and that would lead me down a lot of different paths going forward. And then another interesting event, I guess the second main event that I'll call, it's kind of some people would say it just happenstance, some people would say it just happens. I think it's part of God's plan, and I think it's kind of cool. When I was 13 years old, my best friend, who happened to live next door to us, for his birthday, his parents wanted to buy him a AM/FM radio with a cassette player in it. And the reason they wanted to do that is because he loved listening to Pittsburgh Pirate baseball games, and they wanted to be able to get this radio for him so he could record the baseball games while he was at school, and he could listen to them when he got home. On December 23rd, the phone rings, and it's Ken on the phone going, "Scott, you've got to come over here right now. I'm listening to Radio Kiev in Russia, Radio Tirana in Albania, HCJB in Quito, Ecuador, the BBC, the Voice of America, all of these shortwave radio stations, which were just unbelievably fascinating, and it got me really, really interested in wireless and radio. That shortwave radio hobby morphed into the telecommunications hobby of what is ham radio. My interest in the sciences and technology and engineering that came from the lunar landings remained. I went away to school. I majored in physics. I have a bachelor's degree in physics from Penn State. Went to graduate school for a while at Kent State University, and then I came home and started to work at a local television station. And the reason I got the job there was because I had my ham radio license. My career as a telecommunications engineer, all the way from RF engineer to vice president of engineering, was all predicated and occurred because of this hobby and the amateur radio experiences that I've had. I met my wife and at that job working for and doing telecommunications engineering. So all that I have, my children, my family, is all basically due to that. And again, many people would say, well, that's just the luck of the draw, kind of how the way things worked out. I tend to disagree and view that as not only a gift from God, but a plan in His plan. So getting involved in the radio hobby through shortwave radio initially, and my original interest in the sciences from the lunar landings have made me who I am and altered the course of my entire life. And I'm glad they did. And I still think back to those days of sitting on the floor watching the TV in July of 1969 as Neil Armstrong came down and stepped foot on the moon as probably the most defining moment in my life.